Welcome to Global Tax Talk. I'm Chloe Fox. I recently had the opportunity to sit down with Edwin Visser and Keetie Jakma in Prague, where we recorded a series of videos to look at the 2025 EU tax agenda. In this video, we focus on the EU Commission's tax work programme and how it attempts to support the broader agenda of European competitiveness. Competitiveness was one of the key themes coming out of the influential report by former Italian Prime Minister Mario Draghi, which was published by the EU Commission in September 2024. The report examined the challenges faced by industries and companies that are operating within the EU. The report also issued recommendations to inform the Commission's work for a new plan for European sustainable prosperity and competitiveness. Now, let's hear more from Keetie.
Keetie, if I can start with you. Could you give us a bit of an overview of the work program of the Commission and how that program does support competitiveness? Because that's the new buzzword, one of the new buzzwords in Brussels. All efforts have to support competitiveness.
Yeah, sure.
So what's happening?
Yeah, well, there's quite a lot happening. But if we take a look at the work program of the European Commission, we can see that it is really based on the Letta and Draghi reports. And those reports were mentioned to analyze the current state of the economy and productivity within the European Union, also compared to the US. So what we see in this work program of the European Commission is that it is really boosting the competitiveness of the European Union, to lowering the administrative burden, and to create a business-friendly environment for the European Union. Well, and we already see a lot of regulation really focusing on those strategic areas. So as you mentioned, the Omnibus regulation, that is really about sustainability reporting and narrowing the scope, but also, on the other hand, the Clean Industrial Deal, and that is really boosting more the energy transition, decarbonization, and it's more focusing on simpler state aid rules. And from a tax perspective, also stimulating tax incentives and creating those. So very interesting things happening. As you mentioned before, the Savings and Investment Union is also very important communication recently released by the European Commission. And I think that is really a basis where we can see next steps of the European Commission.
Okay, you talked about tax incentives. How does the Commission envision that to design tax incentives at the EU level? How would that work?
That's absolutely an interesting question because, of course, we know that we need funding for tax incentives because it's lowering the tax base or the amount of taxation paid. So what they do is they want to publish guidelines for European member states. So European member states can then introduce those tax incentives. And what they're thinking about is, for example, tax incentives in the form of depreciation. But that's, again, the idea. So we don't know yet how they will look like. But at least we know when they will come. And I think we can expect them in June. And then, of course, it's up to the member states to implement it or not. So on the other hand, we can also maybe expect a little bit more competition between member states because you can choose or not to implement those tax incentives. But on the other hand, it is a guidance and really a dot on the horizon for the European Commission to boost decarbonization and this energy transition.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you made because Draghi and Letta talk about defragmentation and harmonization and just giving recommendation or guidelines, which are non-binding probably, because it's not an official instrument, could lead to more competition between member states. And you mentioned something in the earlier sentence about state aid, I think. So state aid is an issue. So hand in hand, I think state aid should be reformed in order to make this possible. Is that true or am I mistaken?
No, absolutely. That goes hand in hand. So the European Commission will definitely propose an easier state aid procedures because the application of, for example, introducing a tax incentive has to be much easier for member states. And also allowing state aid. So that will be legislative proposals. Because that is needed, because that is from a European Union basis. So yes, it will be at the same time released, and it is linked to this Clean Industrial Deal.
Okay, and we saw in the program, I think, that no new directives are proposed. Still the existing directives are at the table of the Council. So this tax policy incentives will be part of other legislative proposals. And will that work with unanimity or qualified majority voting, do you think?
Yeah, that is a good question, and I don't have the answer yet. But at least maybe a guess. I think it will be a part of other legislative proposals. So I think those taxation elements will be part, for example, of energy taxation directives. For energy directives or industrial legislative proposals. And I think it will be, especially the fact that it will be majority voting, to come to an agreement very quickly, because, well, we all know we have the experience with unanimity voting that it will take a long time to come to an agreement between 27 member states. So indeed, I think my best guess is that it will be an element of other non-taxation proposals, but we'll see.
As Keetie described, the path towards competitiveness includes lowering the administrative burden to create a more business-friendly environment within the EU. And indeed, Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has promised to reduce the corporate reporting obligations by 25% across the board, but also by 35% for small businesses. Moreover, both public and private sectors have emphasised the need for significant tax simplification and harmonisation. Finally, there have been calls to reconsider the unanimity rule when it comes to EU tax policy making. Anyway, there's a lot more to come. Thank you for joining us. Come back next time so that you stay global tax ready.